11-year-old neighbor's snowman is trying to kill me. I need help. My name is Joy, and I am from Bozeman, Montana. I've been a member of No Sleep for a while now. I've always loved reading stories about ghosts and demons. I even wished I could have some supernatural experiences to tell my children. I learned the bad way that these are no things we should wish for ourselves. I'm going to tell everything in chronological order, but please, someone living near this zone, help me. Nobody believes me, but it is outside. Everything started on December 13th in the evening. I was in my room getting myself ready to go out to dinner with some friends. We were going to celebrate Jean's birthday, one of my best friends, and it was going to be a special night because 2017 had treated him rough, so we wanted to make it a wonderful birthday for him. We were going to have dinner in a fancy Italian restaurant, so I was really excited. It was almost time for me to go, and I remember looking out my bedroom window while I put on some jewelry and seeing my little neighbor outside, playing with a snowman in his garden. The boy, who I will call Jarvis from now on, is Mr. and Mrs. Morris's son, the kind people who lived opposite of my house. I learned he suffers from epilepsy and Asperger's syndrome when I babysitted him while his mother was giving birth to his little sister Mia around September this year. During the week his parents were out, he was never an easy child to take care of. Not that he was disrespectful or naughty. In fact, he was the total opposite, besides from the kid being a complete genius. But I tried to treat him warmly, only to receive some stone-cold answers and dead serious expressions. But I smiled nonetheless. It was nice seeing him play outside and have some fun even if it was all by himself. However, my smile faltered when I took a closer look at the snowman he was playing with. The snowman was incredibly big itself. There was no way the 11-year-old kid could have built that shit alone. Its arms consisted of two thin but massive contorted and almost black tree branches, but they didn't look too heavy. I hadn't been aware of such trees growing in this area. In the tummy area there was another face. The eyes on this one were as black as the ones resting on the head, but the mouth of this face was wide open. It almost seemed like a void, but that was nothing compared to its head. The eyes were so big and black they seemed to stare all the way into your soul, and the mouth was twisted into a huge grin. Hell, it even had 4 black horns. It made me look away the second I spared it a glance. My phone notified me that my friends were already on their way to pick me up, so I ended up forgetting the worrisome event for a while, and headed happily to the birthday party. On December 15th, around 8 p.m., I was walking home from the coffee shop I work in, when I saw Jarvis crouched down and whispering something to the snowman. I was surprised it was still there. I mean, kids build and then destroy snowmen a lot. I know what you're thinking. He was talking to a freaking snowman, but the thing that surprised you was that it was still there from the day before? Yeah, of course it was creepy. But I wasn't really fazed by that fact because I had grown to learn that Jarvis was all quirks and weirdness. So I just entered my house without looking too much at those two because, surprised or not, the snowy friend my little neighbor had built still made the hairs on my neck stand. 2 days later, things started to get fucked up for real. It was 11 a.m. when our mother asked me and my 9-year-old brother, Matthew, to start putting the Christmas decorations in our garden. It is always our father who decorates it, since he loves gardening so much. But this year his sciatica wouldn't let him do that, so it was us who had to do the job. We didn't complain though. When we put down the large cardboard boxes and started hanging the lights, I noticed the street was eerily quiet. I frowned to myself because what I remembered from other breaks was that our street was pretty vivid, as it is quite long and has lots of people living on it. I looked around hoping to see Ms. Collins, the lady next door, walking her annoying chihuahua, but she wasn't anywhere near. Soon enough, we heard the front door of the Morris house being opened. We saw Jarvis by his mother's hand, still in her PJs, who kissed him on the head. My brother actually made a face, and went back inside, leaving him alone. There's no need to say that he went to play by his beloved and disturbing snowman. Matthew looked at me weird, but went on with his task. And so did I until I heard the sound of something being dropped on the ground. I looked over my shoulder, as I was with my back to the kid, a little bit afraid, and saw Jarvis convulsing on the ground by the snowman. It was Matthew who screamed to alert my parents and the kids because I was completely paralyzed. Jarvis was rushed to the hospital in no time, and my mother told me he was probably just having an epilepsy attack. My family went inside, but I stayed sitting on the porch, processing everything that had happened, with the snowman looking my way. I lifted my gaze and made contact with its abnormally black eyes. That's when I saw the one detail that made my eye twitch. It had been moved, more forward than it was before, only a meter or two, but it was still noticeable. I became paranoid for the next 4 days, because as each day passed, the damned snowman seemed to move more meters forward, from the Morrises' front garden to the sidewalk. At first I thought, that makes no fucking sense. But I was 99% sure my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. Now that I think of it, it would have been a good idea to try and take some pictures, but I was really stressed to come up with any ideas like that. The day Jarvis arrived home from the hospital, on December 21st, my breath got caught in my throat when I observed that it was almost touching the road. Furthermore, it completely ticked me off seeing how no one in my family would comment anything about the creepy snowman, not even my brother, who had seen the boy have an epileptic attack just beside it a few days ago. So I started writing everything down in my personal journal, because I felt it would be extremely useful in the future. Let's skip 3 days. Christmas Eve. I had just returned home from the local ice rink with Jules and Jean. We had a great time this afternoon, and even though we had to hurry up to be home in time to get ready for the Christmas Eve dinner, I was truly mesmerized with how beautiful the city looked when it was bathed in light snow and Christmas lights. It was around 6 p.m. when I finished dressing up and went downstairs. Everything was on point, and the meal my father was cooking smelled delicious. My mother, who was trying to tame Matthew's auburn hair, asked me to go outside and check the garden lights and decorations. I rolled my eyes, but internally understood why she did that. My grandmother, her mother-in-law, and she had never gotten along very well, and every time she visited us, she checked our entire house with a sharp eye in order to catch the smallest imperfection and let my mother know through spiteful hints. Mother grew tired of this and sent her children to do the dirty work. This time it was me who had to check that everything was in its right place before the rest of my family arrived. I grabbed my coat and headed outside. As I descended the few steps of my front porch, I noticed a few changes in the environment. It was very cold. I mean, we are used to having cold weather here in Montana, but it was colder than usual, much colder. The street, although well lit and decorated, was so quiet. The only thing I heard was my own breathing, and it looked especially spine-chilling. I gathered a little bit of courage to lift my gaze towards my neighbor's house. It seemed to be lit, but no sound came from it. The snowman was still there. It hadn't moved an inch since Jarvis was discharged from the hospital, even though I hadn't seen him once since that day. I tried not to think about all that and let it ruin my night, and then I got to work. I spent a good 10 minutes checking around the many ornaments we had sprawled on our garden, and when I was ready to get back home, I heard the Morrises' dog, a quite big and fearless Rottweiler, whimper. It made the hairs on my neck stand because that dog had been with them for a few years, and I never heard it whimper like that, like he was scared. I turned around very slowly. I felt like something was going to lunge at me. Everything happened in seconds, but I got a good look at it. There it stood, the snowman, less than 5 feet away from me, only this time it looked much more alive. It had grown several feet taller than me. Its arms, previously made of dark branches, looked like chunks of rotting flesh with twisted fingers growing from it. Both mouths held razor-sharp teeth. Its horns had grown longer, and the tips were as sharp as the teeth. But what drove me into shock was its 2 pairs of eyes. There was nothing there, just 4 empty holes, or sockets. I tried to put some distance between us by stepping backwards. Everything was dead silent, as no sound could escape from my throat. And I only managed to let out a scream when it stretched a limb and plunged its nailed fingers through my thigh. I must have fallen and hit my head, because I do not remember anything past that. I woke up on Christmas evening to excruciating pain in every part of my body. My mother was there, still in the same clothes as the night before, and looking like she'd cried her eyes out. As soon as she saw me awake, she ran to the nearest doctor to have him check up on me. After the nurse came to change my IV, the doctor came in with my mother and father behind him. They looked exhausted. However, every fiber of distress in my body was drained when I was told what had happened to me, because even though the doctor asked me to try and remember last night's events, I wasn't able to do so. The doctor told me I had been attacked. The attack was produced by an animal. The only animal that was around at the time was the Morris dog, so my parents assumed it was the Rottweiler. My wounds weren't that severe except for the one in my leg, because according to the doctor, its teeth almost touched my bone. I ran out of words, but when they found their way back, I tried to explain what had happened to me. I told them with painfully accurate details what had happened since the day I first saw the damn snowman. Needless to say, they didn't believe me one bit. It was huge. How come they didn't see it? I even made my brother pay me a visit just to talk. He must have seen it the morning Jarvis convulsed beside me. He was with me all the time. But Matthew only said no. He didn't remember seeing any snowman. Eventually, the doctor came up with the conclusion the snowman thing was post-traumatic stress disorder, and they prescribed me anti-anxiety sedatives. I couldn't wrap my head around anything that was happening, and I stayed persistent on what really happened to me until the next day. After so many failed attempts to make my family and doctors believe me, I started thinking that maybe what they told me was true. It felt real, but again, maybe I had just hallucinated. That thought sank in my head, and it actually made me feel relieved. That meant everything I had experienced wasn't true. No demonic snowman. No anything. That wasn't until yesterday. Yesterday morning, the doctor came in and told me that even though some of my wounds were still severe, and I would still have to go to therapy, both my physical and mental state had improved, and that if everything was still okay, I would be able to go home the next day. My mother brought me my computer and my journals, and it made me happy to have some contact with my friends. After I answered tons of worried texts from my friends, curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to check my journal entries that corresponded with the past 15 days. It was all true. The snowman existed. It was all written in my notebook. I felt as if those notes I made were the only contact with sanity I had, because I had really started to think I had become nuts. I got discharged from the hospital today at 4 p.m. and slept through the whole trip from the hospital to my house as a result of being exhausted from staying up all night rereading my journals again and again. I woke up an hour ago or so in my bedroom. It was hard to go downstairs with crutches, but managed to nonetheless. My house was, and still is, empty. I tried calling for my mother, my father, and Matthew, but I got no response. I went to the kitchen to check if they had left some kind of note. There wasn't any note on the fridge. But I looked through the damn kitchen window, and there it was, planted in my front garden, dangerously close to my house. I screamed and went out of the kitchen as fast as I could. I have tried calling my parents, Jules and Jean, but they haven't answered. I'm hiding right now in some spot in my house. Please, if you live near Bozeman, you have to come and help me. It is knocking on the front door.